You know Norman Bates, you know Leatherface, and you certainly know Buffalo Bill. What you might not know is that these three horror film icons are merely facets of a single, real nightmare. A man who lived isolated on a decaying farm in rural Wisconsin. His name was Edward Theodore GEIN, but the world would come to know him as the Butcher of Plainfield. He only murdered 2 women, but his macabre hobbies and the decor of his home shocked America so thoroughly that they inspired the entire slasher genre. Get ready, because for 30 minutes, we're going to dive into the story of the man who turned human remains into household items and, in doing so, redefined the very concept of horror. What was found on Ed GEIN's farm? The answer will hold you until the end. Imprisoned in his mother's shrine. To understand the monster, we have to go back to Plainfield, Wisconsin. In the early 1900s, a simple rural town, but one with a dark secret growing on one of its farms. Ed GEIN grew up under the domination of his mother, Augusta GEIN. She was a fanatical religious woman, controlling and extremely rigid, constantly preaching about the sinfulness of sex and women, except for herself. Ed and his brother Henry were forbidden from having friends or any social contact. The GEIN farm wasn't a home. It was a prison. Ed grew into a shy, socially inept young man, completely dependent on his mother. His world revolved solely around Augusta. The first death set the stage. First the father, George GEIN. Then in 1944, the mysterious death of his brother, Henry GEIN, in a swamp fire. Henry had been criticizing Augusta's controlling influence, but the official cause of death was asphyxiation. Was it an accident? We'll never know. But a year later came the turning point, the death of Augusta in 1945. At 39, Ed GEIN was utterly alone. In an act of madness, he sealed off his mother's room in the front of the house, living only in the kitchen and pantry, preserving Augusta's shrine. Grief turned into obsession, longing turned into psychosis, and to bring his mother back, Ed GEIN needed a body. The macabre craftsmanship. Unable to commit murder initially, GEIN found a bizarre solution: grave robbing. He sought out the corpses of middle-aged women who resembled his mother. It's estimated that GEIN exhumed over 40 bodies over the course of a decade. And what did he do with those stolen bodies? He transformed them. This is the part of the story that inspired horror cinema and shocked America to the core. Ed GEIN used human parts to make household items. He created chairs upholstered with human skin, bowls made from skulls, and a lampshade crafted from a human face. Most disturbing, he fashioned masks, vests, and even belts made from female nipples, which he wore in rituals where he attempted, in some way, to become Augusta herself. This desecration went on for years, right under everyone's noses. But Ed GEIN's madness was about to escalate into something even darker. The discovery that paralyzed America. In 1954, Ed GEIN committed his first confirmed murder. Mary Hogan, the owner of a local tavern. GEIN shot her and took her body, later confessing that she looked like his mother. But the crime that finally ended his insanity occurred in 1957. The victim, Bernice Worden, 58, the owner of a hardware store. The deputy sheriff, Frank Worden, Bernice's son, was the first to be suspicious. Ed GEIN was the last customer seen at the store. What he saw there led him directly to the GEIN farm. What authorities found inside shocked the nation. The horror was everywhere, spread throughout every room. And in the shed was the body of Bernice Worden, hung upside down and gutted like hunted game. The scene was so gruesome, so unimaginable for a small rural town, that it immediately inspired one of horror's greatest classics. The seed of classic horror, Ed GEIN's story spread like wildfire, a real monster living next door. Hollywood didn't waste any time. Just 3 years after his arrest, in 1960, the world met Norman Bates from Psycho. The similarity is undeniable. An isolated, obsessed son completely controlled by his mother's figure. The detail of Bernice Worden's body in the shed is the direct inspiration for the scene involving Bates's mother. Then came the explicit terror. In 1974, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre introduced Leatherface. The villain, who wears a mask of human skin and decorates his house with bones, is the most literal and brutal reflection of Ed GEIN's craftsmanship. And to to complete the trinity in 1991, The Silence of the Lambs and Buffalo Bill. His desire to create a woman's suit from the skin of his victims is a modern recreation of GEIN's obsession with wearing women's bodies. Ed Gein didn't need to be the most prolific serial killer in history. He was simply the most bizarre. And it was this bizarreness that gave us the classic horror we know. The Final Destiny. In court, Ed Gein was diagnosed with schizophrenia and declared legally insane. He spent the rest of his life in psychiatric institutions. Ironically, he was considered a relatively calm patient in his later years. Gein died in 1984 at the age of 77. The GEIN farm, the site of such horror, was mysteriously destroyed by fire before it could become a horror museum, and the land remains empty. Only a stolen headstone, never replaced, marks the place where this horror took place. Ed Gein was a lonely, broken, and obsessed man, but his capacity to distort the human body and the dignity of the dead gave America something new to fear: domestic horror. That monster that doesn't come from far away, but from the abandoned farm at the end of your road. Ed Gein's story proves that sometimes fiction doesn't need to be invented. It just needs to be discovered. Which of these films scares you the most? Psycho, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, or The Silence of the Lambs? Leave your comment.